Pagoo Chapter 12 Hermit House from an Ancient Jungle. Sad Pagoo was right back where he started. He skulked in the snail tube, glaring at the world. True, this tube was the first time he had moved around all by himself, even with a hallmate dragging his feet. It had been home. But after one glorious gallop in that horned shell, that had been living. Now the horned shell was gone, lost. No, it was stolen by that ungrateful guy he had lugged all over the place. Why, Pagoo could lick him high, tight, or low with one claw only. But not any more. The fellow was safe in Pagoo's very own shell. Pagoo's spirits were low for another reason. Besides the loss of his new shell, he was about to molt again. He crawled from his old tunnel, began a big wrestling match with himself, and finally kicked off his clinging test. When his armor was off, he made a discovery. He couldn't go home. Already it expanded far beyond its former size. Pagoo was too large now to fit in the same old concrete tile. Soft and wrinkled all over, his new armor wouldn't harden for a while. He must lie low out of sight. He scuttled up a rock and hid in the crack of a ledge. Of late, Pagoo's life had been held down to the tide pool floors by the bulk of the snail tube and the weight of his hellmate. For a long time he had not explored the spaces above. While in the horn shell, he had galloped about too rapidly to see much of the scenery. Waiting here in the crack, Pagoo met some new creatures. He had thought all the bumps in the rocks were limpets, but now he noticed one that was different. This chiton slid on its foot like a limpet, but its hard shell was shingled in 8 sections. Pagoo saw a chiton that a starfish had pulled from a rock and then, for some starry reason, had left behind. It lay cupped, a sea cradle, all pink inside. Pagoo scuttled forward to see better, but the chiton rolled into a ball and rocked in the waves. Several lazy cucumbers lolled about, looking like sunburned dill pickles. These cucumbers even had lumps and bumps. Compared to little Pagoo, they were larger than elephants. As he watched, Pagoo saw one of the cucumber unfold into a crown of filmy branching testicles for gathering food. So it's kind of unfolding there. Along bottom rows of lumps and bumps, tube feet popped out as the animal moved slowly away in its usual search for food. These spiny-skinned cucumbers were tube-footed cousins of stars, urchins, and dollars. After a moment or two of snoozing, Pagoo was startled by whip-like arms romping over him in a great hurry. 5 of these wiggly arms grew out of a little disc that looked like a fur-covered cookie. This small serpent star was still another cousin of the spiny-skinned star, urchin, cucumber, and dollar clan. Being a shiny creature in bright sunlight, this little brittle or serpent star liked to come out only after dark. Today, some worm must have nudged this one out from under its protective rock. If an enemy caught it by one of its brittle serpent-like arms, that arm would break off. The rest of it might escape, but for a long time this brittle star would hide away while it waited for another arm to grow. Pagoo had seen this wriggly animals as dim shadows on nights when the tide was out. They would pull themselves up over the wet rocks, exploring with sensitive arms for bits of food. Pagoo glimpsed this lively fellow's mouth on the underside of the furry disc. He saw the rows of spines and tube feet along its squirming arms. Then it darted back to hide again, away from the bright sunlight. Pagoo came out from his crack to lunch on a tidbit which came drifting down. Like all the crab clan, Pagoo relished almost any kind of meat, but he could never know that, along with brittle stars, cucumber snails, and others, he was part of the cleanup squad of Tidepool Town. Pagoo returned to the safety of his crack at the edge of the rocky ledge. Not far below him, a flowery garden of unfolded as he watched. He looked down into flowers that were not flowers. They, too, were animals with petal-like tentacles spread to capture food. They glowed in the water, lavender, pink, and green. They had lived here for a very long time. These sea anemones had initiated flowers in this place for 100, 200, even more than 300 years. With very few enemies, they seemed able to live forever. These animal flowers were greedy for all kinds of fleshy food. Hermits are quick enough to race across spread out petals and escape. Pagoo could not remember, but two large hermit boxers had once dragged him safely across one of these traps. Now he saw a fat snail feeding on a strand of kelp below him, and a hermit crab stumbled over the rock behind the snail. The hermit slipped, clutched the snail for a balance, then hermit and snail, wearing the same kind of shell, tumbled down together into an open anemone. The hermit leaped up and danced away, but he had to hurry. Already stinging tentacle petals were curving upward, and he had to break through them like a pig crashing a green picket fence. The snail was doomed. It was frightened by its fall, and snail-like hugged itself into its shell for protection. Flowery petals folded over it, as though the anemone was pulling a drawstring. All tentacles disappeared inward. This animal had gulped the snail and was a bright flower no longer. Now it was nothing but a muddy-looking bulge with a dimple at the center to show where the snail had gone. The anemone had a powerful tenderizer which can digest most snails, but does not harm the shells. As Pagoo watched, he saw another anemone tossing out a shell after the snail inside had been digested. That puckered anemone, an untidy blob, now unfolded into a delicate blossom. As lavender pink petals uncurled, Pagoo saw the empty shell roll out clean and shiny and drop to the tide pool floor. Once again, as he had thought uncounted years, an enemy animal, with no urge to help anyone but its own hungry self, had made a new home ready for some hermit crab. This time, that hermit crab might be Pagoo. Chapter 12.